What's up, Chasers? We have a very active weather pattern throughout these next couple of days following this trough that's moving eastward throughout the U.S. Stay tuned because we're going to tell you what's going to happen, where it'll be, and when it'll happen. The SPC Day 2 outlook outlines an enhanced risk across portions of Kansas and Nebraska following a trough that's moving across the U.S. And the risks on this day, we have a 5% tornado, a 30% hatched wind risk, and a 30% hatched hail risk in this area.
And now as we move into day three and day four, which will be Sunday and Monday for our significant severe weather risk, we see the SPC has a day three enhanced risk across portions of the Midwest and Minnesota, South Dakota, and Nebraska. Now, honestly, with time, I expect this to shift downwards a little bit into the Kansas region, but this is all being caused by a mid-level trough that is digging southeastward across the country, bringing a lot of shortwave disturbances out ahead of it. So primary risk right now, all hazards are on the table. So we see we'll have a very good tornado risk later on with our increasing SRH values and also depending on cyclogenesis location and intensity, as well as large hail and damaging winds. And a lot of this is going to depend on the storm mode that we see.
Right, so looking at our day four severe weather outlook, we can see quite a vast 30% risk area stretching from all the way down from Oklahoma up into Wisconsin, with a wider 15% risk area stretching from all the way to Texas to Michigan. So this will very likely be the most significant severe weather day um, of the event. And the SBC also has used quite vivid wording with this outbreak, with this severe weather event. They note that a severe weather outbreak is possible, and this will be our first outbreak this season with a negatively tilted trough that will eject across the Central Plains, which will result in extremely favorable conditions for supercells capable of all hazards, large hail, damaging winds, and yes, the potential for strong tornadoes, potentially some long tracked as well. Um, so large hail, and also as this trough ejects across, we'll have strong least cyclone development, which will which along with the dry line stretching will increase instability and strengthen the shear. And we have the SPC has also noted a large clockwise enhancement of the low-level photographs across portions of the plains later in the day as the low-level jet increases, which will bring about a risk for those strong and intense tornadoes.
Yeah, I think also talking about Monday, a lot of it also will depend on the storm mode and how a crashing cold front could play a factor in whether it becomes linear or if storms get undercut or not. But I would definitely anticipate um, the enhanced 30% area to be expanded slightly further south, just based off of what I've seen. And I wouldn't be surprised if we opened with a day three moderate risk across portions of Iowa and Kansas.
Day five, we're likely to see some more threats coming in through Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, just kind of that general area. I would expect it to expand eastward as the days progress as well. The biggest thing is it's going to be within the warm sector of the low pressure that's kind of set itself in that region. As that cold front keeps pushing through, it's going to see a lot of instability that it's going to give elevated lift to, and that's kind of when it's going to keep giving those storms the potential to form, and you're going to see a lot more elevated convection within that region. So it's going to continue for the next few days now. So kind of looking at this four panel, we're going to look through Saturday 12Z through 0Z. That's kind of when the biggest threat is going to be hitting some of these regions, and you're going to kind of see you've got that, it's kind of weak at the moment on the southern end of that trough, but sitting in that somewhat mid-region, you're going to be feeding through those short waves, and that's where a lot of things are going to be setting up. Of course, right, you're kind of in the middle of the jet. You're not necessarily in a streak, but that low pressure that's sitting there right on that Oklahoma-Kansas border, that's really what's going to be providing a lot of just that instability right there by switching through that warm sector. That going up is going to be providing a lot of that buoyancy that's lasting in there. And some of those higher winds that are actually going to be fueling the potential for the low level jets to make significant impacts. It's what's going to strengthen that. And that's where those overnight threats are going to kind of come in Saturday night when we see the potential for linearization. And as you see, it keeps developing. The trough will continue to deepen. It will force more short waves through as we await the jet stream to come into play. And that's really where a lot of things are going to start happening, kind of on the western portion of that region. Looking Sunday at 0Z, that's when you're going to start seeing that low-level jet mixed with that forced-in short wave. That's kind of when a lot of things are going to start.
And you can also see that cyclogenesis happening over eastern Colorado. So there's definitely going to be a lot of lift in that region. And the timing of the short waves will also determine what the biggest hazard will be, either tornadoes or if it's more nocturnal, it would be more damaging winds and potentially large hail, depending on our Cape Valleys, which we'll get to later on. So now as we go more forward in time, moving into Sunday, we can see our trough continuing to deepen and advance east and southeastwards into our risk area across portions of the Midwest. Now, as we see, shortwaves will continue to be forced through around the trough and providing our lift for these risk areas across Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa, and Kansas. We can also see that we also have new cyclogenesis occurring over the Kansas region, providing us with lift, along with our strong southerly flow continuing to advect moisture into the risk area. So now as we go forward in time more, we can see that our trough will continue to deepen, and as we move into Monday, we'll see that this trough will become negatively tilted, as mentioned earlier in the SPC outlooks. So what this means is that you're going to have a lot more turning throughout your profile and more significant tornado potential as you have more wind shear. And you can also see another low pressure system developing, this time a little bit further south across portions of the Texas Panhandle and the Oklahoma Panhandle. This is why I also think that the risk area should get expanded slightly further south, as we'll probably see some shortwaves moving through that region as well, along with our persistent lift and enhanced SRH values because of that low pressure system.
I really want to kind of highlight in this as well. I mean, looking at your 850 millibar temperatures, the strength of this dry line, as well as the time of year we're starting to move in, you're getting these really dry air. It's allowing things to heat up, not just at the surface, but I mean, if you look not just in the Texas Panhandle, but upwards in Oklahoma and even into southern Kansas, you're seeing those temperatures that are greater than 30 Celsius, which is insane for that height.
Very strong.
I mean, and especially with how far north it extends, and I get that some of the western portions of Texas, right, you're naturally going to see those higher elevations where you're going to see that dry line kind of take effect. But this really is going to kind of add to the level of how warm the air is and how much this really might play in to creating that instability when you have those lower level portions that are just so warm. And later on when we go into the soundings, you're going to kind of see how this is going to impact your instability, especially when you're looking at the cold front and the dry line. If you're wanting elevated Cape, this is going to prove that it will be there.
Yeah, something else you can see too at 850, you can see that cold front as well. So the timing of that's really going to play a big factor into what our biggest risk is going to be moving into Monday evening.
Yeah, so moving more into Tuesday, we continue to see that trough moving along further east. We start seeing the influence of the upper level jet, although it is a little further north in the system. At the same time, we're going to see our fronts near the surface are going to continue to move further east. And because of that, a lot of the convection we're going to see is going to be a little bit more elevated. So probably not going to see that high of a tornado risk on these days. We're probably looking more at maybe some hail versus some damaging wind risks on Tuesday. So not quite as impressive as the days before.
Something else that's going to kind of keep feeding this as you look at your 250 and your 500 millibar charts, you can kind of see that wind. You're going to get that Pacific moisture stream happening in the upper levels that it's kind of going to keep that upper level air above that 700, above that 650 millibar saturated ish. So you might see some upper level clouds that are kind of going to feed into any updrafts that get in there. So if any storms do come and you get a strong enough updraft, those hail possibilities really are going to be taken advantage of.
All right, so looking at our surface dew point values, we see that at 12Z on Saturday, we see actually quite sufficient moisture in sort of the central Great Plains region into the 60s, and we can see sort of a dry line starting to set up in sort of in western sections of Texas and Kansas, and then sort of to the north in Nebraska and Minnesota. We also see a sharp gradient indicative of a front. So as we go through the day on Saturday, going to through 18.0Z, you can see that low-level moisture quickly ramping up, and we've got values in 60s and 70s even, which will which are it's favorable for the severe weather we'll be seeing on Saturday. And then we can also see the dry line is a lot more distinct now. And then also that front sort of just kind of stalling around Nebraska. It's not really moving that much. But anyways, going through the day on Sunday, we can see a new kind of surge of moisture coming up. Like dew points are already in the 60s at 12Z. And we got the dry line kind of backed up a little bit. But as we'll see throughout the day, it should advance to the east a bit, and then that cold front's kind of just in sort of the same place, but yeah, the low level moisture is more than enough to power kind of fuel these thunderstorms, if you may. And just going through the day, going through 15 18Z, so that dry line does move a bit to the east. And the moisture.
That gradient.
I was gonna say we're talking what in the teens on this side and 60s, almost 70s on this side, and like look how sharp that is. So this is a very steep boundary right here, a very strong boundary. Gonna be great for lifting storms.
Yes.
Well, that's also a very large warm sector.
Yes, that is. Oh my god.
I mean, you have that cyclogenesis happening in like the eastern Colorado area, if I'm not mistaken, and you can just see like the intensity of that low pressure system with how much moisture is being pulled up throughout that vast warm sector. Valleys mostly in the upper 60s in most places, even some spots of 70 in Oklahoma. But just also realizing that some areas like in the Midwest with cornfields, that might honestly be a little bit low as well. You could be seeing closer to 70 in some areas.
Which is impressive for that far north.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And so going through just Sunday night into Monday morning, which will likely be our most active, again, as we've said before, the most active day of the outlook. We can see now kind of a distinct front setting up over Nebraska. You can see this really sharp dew point gradient, and then along with that dry line as well in over the southern part of like southwestern Kansas going down to western Texas, and the dew points increase into the upper 60s. And just going throughout the day, we should see those dew point values increase. Way.
Oh my god. 10 and 70 basically. I mean, wow.
This is the day that I think you have two low pressure systems, right? One further to the north and one further to the south in Oklahoma and Texas area. That's a lot of moisture, man.
Another thing you can see is almost that moisture inflow pattern. I mean, if you look through like Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, into the Oklahoma Panhandle, Kansas, Nebraska, right? You can kind of see where all that moisture advection I was saying would happen. Like you can even see it down to the surface levels, which is kind of impressive. I mean, because that's going to be mostly upper level moisture that's going to be impacted from this. But the fact that it stretches this deep and it like basically just cuts through the dry air I mean, that just slices it right apart.
I think looking at the intensity of those lows, I thought I saw some of the surface pressures getting down to like the upper 980s, which is pretty strong. But it's so cool. You can see that signature on the surface.
It's a really
It's
impressive
very
setup for
cool.
Monday. Yeah, this is. I mean, something is going to happen Monday.
So yeah, when you're saying that these pressures are going to get below or get into the 980s, like this system is already sitting around the DFW area, and right, this airport has gotten all the way down to 985.6, which is pretty low. And once again, we're expecting this low pressure system to continue to deepen and intensify. So some of these pressures are going to get lower. It's not just going to stop there.
So, as we go more forward in time, heading into Tuesday and later parts of the week, we see that we do see a more linearized mode with the cold front, seeing our elevated moisture out ahead of the front in the warm sector, with areas reaching into the upper 60s and even the low 70s in some areas. So, plenty of moisture for these storms to work with as they continue to propagate off to the south and east through the rest of the country. All right, so starting off with Saturday, we're going to take a look at our moisture, not just at the surface, but also throughout the column, as well as our overall storm motion to get an idea of how fast these storms will be moving and where they'll be moving to. So starting off Saturday evening, we can see that throughout our risk area, we do have a more northerly storm motion component with PWatt values generally around the 1 to 1.2 inch range. Not very impressive overall values, but still enough for storms to fire and be able to maintain themselves. Now, as we go more forward in time, moving into our significant severe weather days on Sunday and Monday, we can also see the location of our boundary helping to lift our storms, and we can see out ahead of it, we do see a more north-northeasterly storm motion, and with more moisture being pulled up, not just at the surface, but through the column, we see that we have our PWatt values elevated more upwards between 1.7 inches in the southern areas, upwards of 1.3 to 1.4 inches throughout most of our risk area across the further north Midwest region. And as we go more into Monday, we'll see another cyclogenesis event occur across the Oklahoma region, and we'll see that our PWatt values get pulled up and elevated even more, with some spots upwards of 1.7 inches, with generally 1.6 inches around the Iowa and Kansas regions. And we can see our storm motion is also still relatively consistent, moving north-northeast parallel to the boundary, and we'll be moving at 40 knots, which is fairly quick storm motion. So just a heads up for people in these risk areas, a faster storm motion can generally give you less time to prepare for storms, so just keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, I mean, these are going to be moving really fast. I'm seeing some. There's even a 50 knot motion right here. And just talk about the moisture availability. And I know this is just one model run, and it's the GFS, but I mean, just this one spot is 1.99. We have basically 2 inches of PWatt all the way up in Kansas. So, I mean, talking.
Really goes to show the strength of that low pulling that moisture up.
I mean, these are basically shear vectors. So we have shear, we have moisture, and we've got lift. We're about to get into instability, but I mean, just saying what the ingredients are, they're here. And
I mean, I'm going to keep beating the exact same point over and over again, but you have two moisture sources right now. You have that low pressure really sucking up the Gulf Coast moisture right now. But once again, you've got that little moist conveyor belt almost that's coming from the Pacific, that you have extra moisture in that region. I would expect these PWatt values to actually increase as we get closer to the event, because I mean, you just have the availability. You have it coming from many sources kind of going around the mountain range. You have the availability right here.
And if you see, like, the storm motion vectors are pretty parallel to the boundary. If storms can become linear, and they are expected to later on through the day, we could see some flash flooding potential with some heavy rainfall rates, just seeing how the storm motion is relatively parallel to the boundary, but we will keep an eye out for that as we get closer.
yeah, and then moving into Tuesday's storms, you can see kind of slowing down with those storm motions. We're already down into the 30s around here. Still have a lot of that available moisture on the side where we're looking, but Yeah, so it is still parallel to the boundary, pretty much the same thing we've been seeing, just a little bit more of an eastward tilt.
Okay, looking at our surface-based cape for Saturday evening at 21Z on Saturday, we can see quite high cape values across Kansas and sort of northwestern, excuse me, Missouri of over 4,000, almost 5,000 in some places, at least according to this one model. And if we take a sounding um, at that location, kind of in the bullseye there, yeah, that's quite a bit of cape. So we've got over 5,000, almost 6,000 surface based
Oh
cape.
my god.
Well, in this sounding, your convective temperature is sitting at 88. That surface temperature is sitting at 87. You don't need a lifting mechanism in this one other than surface heating. Like, you could light a match and it's going to start the storms all up.
You see how high that EL is?
Oh my god, that's insane.
That's this you see all the Cape here, and Cape is convective available potential energy, right? So that's kind of like the fuel for storms to be able to use. Whenever you see this much Cape, it should automatically scream to you, very large hail is a possibility. And also, you can look at the dendritic growth zone. You have quite a bit of moisture through the column, and you're going to see a lot of hail growth just based on this sounding. And this is only at 4 p.m. local, and you already have very high SRH values, and it's only going to increase as the evening goes on. You also see our LCL and LFC right next to each other, about the 850 millibar level, so storms will not be having an issue becoming surface based, at least based off of this sounding. And our surface is 6 shear, not the greatest quite yet at 29 knots, but that will pick up as the evening progresses. So also I want to point out on the sounding, you have your inverted V in the low levels with 1300 joules of D cape, indicating that we do have a pretty big downburst risk with any storms that do form.
So looking at our significant tornado parameters for Saturday evening, they're very modest values. Nothing too um, nothing too large or significant, but that will definitely change as we go into Sunday and Monday.
Looking at the Cape on Sunday, and now this is all surface based, keep in mind, but you can kind of see where your maximums are lying just ahead of that frontal boundary. And you can see it kind of loops into that triple point around Nebraska, where you're going to see your biggest bullseyes are going to be for the severe weather threat in terms of Cape, which is going to kind of extend all the way from Nebraska down into central western Texas. And you can still see those values are getting upwards of 4,000 Cape. So not quite the 5 to 6,000 we were seeing for those Saturday values. You're still seeing quite a bit of Cape. You can still see some decent hail, but I would still say those wind threats are kind of going to be highlighted slightly more on this day than before, even if the hail is going to be some good size.
All right, so kind of taking a look at a sounding in eastern Nebraska for Sunday afternoon, we can already see we have really good Cape, most unstable at 4,200 roughly. And I mean, we do have a little bit of a capping inversion. However, I do not see that as much of a problem. And that is because we have so many short waves coming through that it's just going to lift it right past it, as well as we're lifting along that front. So, I mean, we are not in short supply of lifting mechanisms along this storm. And also to point out the hodograph, I mean, this is a pretty good hodograph for what we've got, especially looking at our low level shear wise. We've got strong directional shear and good speed shear. So, I mean, tornadoes are definitely a hazard out of this too. We're looking at both a hail and a tornado hazard. D Cape is also
Yeah,
pretty high too. I mean, I think this is an all hazards threat because looking at that D Cape, what does that say? 1561, and I mean, it's not quite a perfect inverted V, but I mean, we are also setting up for downdrafts, downbursts to really strengthen those thunderstorm winds down at the surface. So,
Well, even then, if you kind of follow your wet bulb, I mean, if the rain starts evaporating, right? your moisture content can only go up so much right now. Your temperature's got a long way to go before it kind of starts reaching that saturation point. So you do have a lot of room for evaporation within this sounding.
I also really want to point out that lapse rate between 700 and 500. 9.3 Celsius per kilometer, nearly dry adiabatic, really indicating our really big hail risk. We have our freezing level a little higher, about 600 millibars or so, but we can also see our SRH values already peaking above 500. And that's really impressive turning, not just in the low levels, but throughout upwards to the 700 millibar level, really showing our significant tornado risk. And you can also see our supercell composite parameter down there at the bottom. What does that say? 36?
36.7.
36 supercell composite parameter. I mean, that's truly impressive, man.
Which, I mean, with everything is not guaranteed to happen, but still, when you do the math, it's an impressive number to get with some of these parameters that we're seeing.
Right. And just from an environmental standpoint, you have all of the ingredients for a significant severe weather outbreak.
I mean, yeah. I mean, Sunday is gonna look good, and I can only imagine what it's gonna look like when we talk about Monday. But I mean, just on one sounding, and I know this is just one point in time at one point in the country, but this is a pretty good sounding to show like what we're gonna see throughout the day on Sunday.
And I'll go ahead and looking at our significant tornado parameter, basically showing how conducive our environment is for significant tornadoes. We can see we do have a pretty enhanced area throughout our risk region in central Nebraska and South Dakota, upwards of values of 3 to 4 STP on this particular model. However, I do think that just based off of what we've seen with ingredients as well as our sounding, I do think that these are a little bit lower than what's actually going to be happening. I would expect closer to the 7 to 8 range. Once we get closer in time and more mesoscale models get into range, we'll probably see that get bumped up a little bit. But we still do have a very conducive environment for strong tornadoes on Sunday.
All right, so now looking at Monday, I mean, this is our biggest risk day that we've seen so far, and it really shows with this instability. I mean, look at this. We have just this huge contour of 4,000, and some of these spots peaking at 4,900, ranging really close to 5,000 in here if you look really closely. So overall, I mean, hail threat is already a big one with such high instability. But let's take a peek at the sounding to get more of an insight on what we're going to see in these storms.
All right, so looking at our sounding for 21Z on Monday, we see that our most unstable cape is in the high 4,000 range. We've got very steep lapse rates, the surface above, and so our shear is also, although our hodograph doesn't look very impressive, the low-level jet should kick in and enhance the surface to 6, should enhance the low-level shear, which will increase our SRH, and also, as more higher resolution models get into range, we should see our hodographs really begin to curve more at the lower levels. And although this is not that impressive of a sounding, we are anticipating that there will be a lot of curvature, and which will boost SRH, which will increase the tornado threat as we get further into the day on Monday, into Monday evening.
Jet sets in. We're also going to see some increase in the upper level shear at the very least.
Just like, it's so weird, just like looking at what we saw with the 4 panel. I just feel like this is underdoing it a lot.
I mean, this is the GFS, and we're looking at what, hour 75. This is still pretty far out. I think honestly, if we take a look at it like more tomorrow, and the closer we get to the event, I think this one's going to look a lot better. I think it's just poorly resolving everything because there's just so much going on.
So now looking at our STP values for Monday evening across our risk areas, we do see an elevated area in Kansas as well as southern Nebraska, as well as further up along the Iowa and Minnesota border. So, still, I believe that the models are not very well um, resolving this with how much is going on. I do think that some of these values, such as SRH or STP, are going to be a little bit higher than what is modeled here. We do already have values upwards of 6 or 7 on some of these model runs across the area. But I think what's going to be really important as we get into the timing for Sunday and Monday is going to be what our actual surface features and observations look like on the day of the event. I think nowcasting is going to be very important to be able to see where the hotspots of some of these parameters are, and that'll really determine where we'll see our strongest tornadoes if they do occur. So moving into Tuesday, we do expect these storms to become more linear and see more of a damaging wind risk as we see our Cape values out ahead of the cold front still fairly elevated in the 3,000 range across Missouri and Arkansas, as well as some higher values across Texas, which we could see some potential dryline initiation if that were to occur. And, well, as we go more forward in time throughout the rest of the week, we'll see our cold front continuing to advance southeastward. And this is surface-based Cape, so we'll still have Cape overnight, but we will see our decrease in general Cape as our front races away from our upper level trough. So as we move through our severe weather outbreak period, we're going to take a look at cloud cover, as this will let us know where the greatest pockets of surface heating will occur, and as well as storm visibility. So as we move through Saturday, we see throughout our risk area, we don't really have a lot of cloud cover through the day, which will allow for surface heating to occur and storms to be able to fire off. And as we move through the night on Saturday night, we see that we have a lot of mid and high level cloudiness and some low level cloudiness in our northern areas. But Sunday, as we clear out in the morning, we see that throughout our risk area, throughout Kansas, Nebraska, and even Iowa, has quite significant clearing through the day, with maybe some mid and high level cloudiness through the day, but not really impacting much for surface heating. And as we continue into the evening hours, we still see so much clearing. We're going to have a lot of surface heating, and this is what is driving our elevated Cape values. And now, as we move more into Monday,
Real quick.
well,
I just want to pop in real quick and just say, just from a viewing aspect, I mean, this is miles of no clouds aside from this one little line. I mean, top tier views are going to be had on the southwest portion of these storms, or southeast portion
yeah.
of these storms.
So yeah, views of the storms will be very impressive, and seeing those towering clouds is going to be very beautiful to see, especially moving into the sunset hours. Now, as we continue to move into Monday, we do see some low-level cloudiness developing overnight Sunday into Monday morning. But as we go more forward in time, we do see that these clouds do begin to break up over our risk area, transitioning more into mid and upper level cloudiness before our storms initiate in the evening hours. Once again, proving to be pretty good visibility conditions if you are storm chasing out there or if you're just viewing the storm from the backyard of your house. And now, as we go more into Tuesday, we'll see that our storm system continues to move off to the southeast, and we can see some linear growth with our low level clouds as this storm system becomes more linear as we go forward in time, moving through the Missouri, Iowa, and Arkansas regions.
Yeah, so Saturday, kind of looking at our risk area, following it, we see that that's what, around 22Z to 0Zs when stuff is going to start forming. So we're talking roughly 5 to 7 local time in these areas when these storms start to form. And yeah, we said this risk is going to be a high wind, high hail threat for Saturday. And then into
If you go back a little bit, more into like the 23Z area for Saturday, you can see that you do have some initial supercells fire up out ahead of our linear system. So if those can become surface based, you might see a pretty good tornado threat. But as these storms will merge as we head into the overnight hours, like Brian said, we'll see more of a damaging wind and potential hail risk.
Good Sunday. I mean, it's not a convective allowing model, but I mean, you can still see that stuff is starting to pop up around that 0Z time frame just before that. And it kind of is going to grow upscale in the northern portions and just kind of start being advected towards the east is what we're going to see with a lot of those storms.
Going through the day on Monday, so our most significant severe weather day, we do see storms fire up along the front slash dry line and form a pretty. This is also still not convective allowing, but you can see that storms will fire up and quickly move along a line towards the east throughout Monday afternoon, Monday evening into like the early hours of Tuesday morning.
Boy, that is a very interesting look from the NAM. That's a very linear mode.
And that's convective looking. When a non-convective allowing model making convective systems happen, that speaks numbers to me at least.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some isolated cells that are sitting out ahead of that line that can get themselves going. If we have any tornado potential on that day, it's going to be in those cells particular, and maybe along some eddies within that line where you can see some higher shear regions that it'll get a chance to maybe drop some stuff for a few minutes. But really, before it gets that linear mode going, any isolated storms that can get forming ahead of it, because those are what's going to line out eventually. That's where you're going to see that biggest tornado threat.
That'll be all for today's video. Thank you guys for watching. As we see, we do have a very active stretch of severe weather coming up throughout mid-May, and this is consistent with what we've seen in the past with severe season generally peaking around this time. There's still a lot of uncertainty with some of the parameters that we've seen. Stuff is going to change as we get closer towards the events, and we'll continue to monitor these trends throughout the week. But stay safe out there, stay weather aware, and have fun chasing.